In contrast to the subject of love, several of your characters take a very mercenary approach to sex. For example, in the story Masquerade, the relationship between Richard and Colette starts out as a purely business arrangement, which continues on, as we see in the follow-up story, Tactical Ruse. Dawn creates a career for herself from sex and business prospects. Do you think your readers will be able to identify with these situations?
Well, it'd be interesting to know that. I guess some readers will be able to identify personally, yeah, sure. And others would obviously have to use their imagination.
Missing Journals has a historical setting, the early 20th century in Brazil,
Yeah.
which slightly sets it apart from the other stories. It tells of the anthropologist Jethro Jenkins, who is invited to stay at the mysterious Frau Eisla's villa. Should he be wary of her?
Ah, yes, you certainly should. The excerpt you're going to read actually is just where he first meets Frau Eisler. And yes, he does get...
Kirsten von Eisler, however, is a character in complete contrast to her husband. She is a woman of such striking features that her presence dominated the company from the moment she appeared at the club. She towered above most of the guests present this evening, and yet despite her large stature, her figure is of perfect proportions. I find it both ironic and amusing that, having travelled all the way to the heart of the Amazon rainforest, the first evidence I discover of the existence of the legendary Amazon woman is that of a beautiful expatriate German. Not only did her physical appearance claim the attention of those around her, but also her personality. On her arrival, Kirsten von Eisler immediately took centre stage and held position of impresaria throughout the evening.
So so that's a story. That story was written.
Several of these stories deal with voyeurism. In Narcissus Through the Window, Emily is unexpectedly watched.
She's very annoyed when she discovers that her rehearsal for her striptease is...
Emily was furious. She flung open the window, picked up a flower pot and chucked it as hard as she could across the well. If only she hadn't been in such a rage, then she would have had a better shot. As it was, the pot landed a few inches short of his windowsill. She picked up another and was about to throw it when a voice called up from the yard below, demanding to know what the hell was going on. Emily replaced the pot and stepped back from the window. Still fuming, she slumped onto the sofa, where she remained for the next 10 minutes. Thinking it best not to mention the events of that afternoon, she hoped Sandra wouldn't notice a missing plant. After all, how was she going to explain the thing landing across the other side of the yard? She returned to the bedroom and packed away her... Is voyeurism a subject you're particularly interested in?
In the wider sense of the word, I think every writer is a voyeur. As an activity, well, you'll have to consult my therapist for that one.
Okay then.
I won't give the address.
Many of the women in your book are very strong, forceful characters. Cordelia, in the audition, decides to take matters into her own hands, whilst Jane in Bodyworks takes control of what perhaps could have been a difficult situation. Do you think this will appeal to your female readers?
Oh, well, yeah. I hope this would appeal to both male and female readers. Times have changed, and also the women in my life have been quite strong characters. Not all the women in my stories are strong, not all the men are weak. In this book, and much of my other writing, most of the characters are just ordinary people leading ordinary lives.
Nicole? I'm going to read an excerpt from Waitress's Bus Stop, and I'd like to ask you about Freya and her friend.
Okay.
The tree took her eye to the upper branches which spread out like a lattice dome over the canal. I vow that thee could make that tree. Ophelia had taken the vacant seat at her table. The bodice of her dress, a delicate needlework in gold, set against the rich blue satin, was still drenched. "Yes, but not the safest to climb," Freya said, "and I would have thought you, for one, would have known that." Ophelia caught her look and smiled. "So, not ready for that as yet?" Freya turned back to the tree. What was Ophelia suggesting? That her fall was intended, and I had been planning to follow her example? Or was she just trying to provoke a memory of Freya's tomboy days at school? She shook her head and wondered why Ophelia hadn't joined her in the library.
But you had a question I think you were going to ask.
Yes, well, could you explain Ophelia to us? And also, how would you, if you had to, how would you explain Freya's personality?
Well, it won't be giving much away if I explain about Freya. She seeks company, she's needy of attention, but is terrified of any emotional intimacy. Well, as for Ophelia, well, you and the readers will have to make up your own mind about that one.
I'd also like to ask about Nicole in La Belle Charente. At first, Dale is captivated by his Aunt Nicole when he goes to stay in France. However, as I show in this excerpt, Nicole's behaviour soon spirals out of control.
Yeah.
We eventually reached an open car park with a sign stating the place was full. Nicole ignored the sign and drove straight in. She dodged between the rows of parked vehicles and only came to a halt when a car blocked our way. The car was reversing into the only vacant spot. Rather than wait for the car to park, Nicole shot into the empty slot and switched off the engine. The other car gave a series of angry blasts on the horn, and the driver wound down his window. I pointed out that he'd been moving into the space, but Nicole just shrugged and got out of the car. With a stream of insults from the driver, we made our way towards the exit.
Ah, yes, Nicole.
How did you develop Nicole's character? Do you consider her to be a psychopath?
Well, she's a dissocial character, certainly. Clearly has psychopathic tendencies. She's aggressive, takes risks, and basically wants to have power over Dale and to control him to the end. Dale has an awful time. He can't wait to get back to England, but his strength of character does come through in the end, and he does stand up to her.
An interesting background story is that of Michael, Freya's husband. Anna is shocked by what she hears about him in the story Distant Relations. His fate is never solved, and I'd like to ask you what you think actually happened to him.
Well, to be honest, I haven't resolved it in my mind myself, actually. Michael electrocuted himself, really, in his Hastings property. And sometimes I think there's an element of foul play too in his death. Considering Freya had collected newspaper cuttings of this and other similar past events, the question is also on other people's minds. It does make you wonder to what extent Freya was involved.
The end of the book leaves the reader wondering about the fate of several of the characters. What happens to Freya and Richard, who leave together, and to Dale after he meets up with fellow artist Lucy? What has Monsieur Raoul and his companion been up to? And will Anna recover from her illness? Do you believe that the reader prefers to make their own endings, rather than having everything spelt out for them?
Well, I think you should never spell out things to the readers. But occasionally I do tie up loose ends.
Some of the characters have a happier ending to their evening at Amatore's restaurant than others. Albie and Prudence, for instance, Natalie and Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
However, for Stephanie, David and Colette, life is not so good. Do you think about your characters after you've finished the book?
Yeah.
And do you think there will be a second volume?
Well, I think about them a lot, actually. Even though I'm working on something else, they still pop up in my mind. I'm kind of, planning, I can see that there would be a second volume to this, because I'm curious how things might develop myself.
What are you currently working on at the moment?
I'm currently working on the psychological thriller set in Brighton. That's my hometown where my children live, and also the historical novel I mentioned earlier, and that really does need my attention. I'd really like to.
I'd like to wish you all the best and
Thank you.
good luck with the launch of Amatore's restaurant.
Thank you very much.
And I look forward to returning to your lovely home in the future.
Yes, certainly I'll invite you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a nice week here, and thanks for paying so much attention to me.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.